أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين إنه خير ناصر ومعين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين وسيد المرسلين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين. Respected brothers, elders, and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to begin by first reciting the verses which the discussion that we're going to be having, inshallah, pertain to. And this is from Surah Al-Isra, Surah number 17, from verse 9 to 11. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن هذا القرآن يهدي للتي هي أقوم ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا كبيرا وأن الذين لا يؤمنون بالآخرة أعتدنا لهم عذابا أليما ويدعو الإنسان بالشر دعاءه بالخير وكان الإنسان عجولا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات. Continuing along the topic of the Quran and me, looking at what the Quran has to say about a human being. Over the last couple of nights, we've mentioned some verses in the Quran where Allah seemingly talks about the human being in a negative light. And this was after we saw in the course of a number of verses in the Quran where Allah props up the human being and says that this is the best of my creations and this is a creation which is higher than the angels. But we saw, like in the last couple of nights, that Allah refers to the human being as Zalum and Jahul. And we explained how, with a proper analysis, we see that this is not a term where Allah is trying to demean human beings, but rather He's trying to reflect a reality, that we have the potential to rise, but we are created starting out at point zero, and we have to gain knowledge and we have to establish justice in order to rise and accomplish the purpose for what we've been created. That's a summary of what we discussed yesterday. Now, tonight we want to cover another one of those seemingly disparaging statements in the Quran where Allah refers to the human being as ajul. Ajul means one who is hasty. So this is one of the important concepts in the Quran where Allah talks about how a human being is an individual who is hasty. And we need to understand what is it that Allah is trying to convey and what sort of message we can take from this as well, to what sort of lessons we can take from it as well. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So let's go through these verses in Surah Al-Isra, starting from verse 9. It's a very beautiful verses, very powerful, and a lot of insight that we can gain from them. Allah says, "Inna hadha al-Qur'an yahdi lillati hiya aqwam." Indeed, this Qur'an guides to that which is aqwam. Aqwam roughly means that which is most upright. It comes from the word qiyam. Qiyam means to stand, literally. And something that is aqwam, something that is standing, it takes on a more general term, which is that when something is right, it's going in the right direction, it's strong, it's firm, it's upright. This is when you say that that thing has qiyam, it's standing. And we kind of have that concept in English as well too. We say that something is standing strong. It's not necessarily standing, but it's fulfilling its purpose in the best way possible. Allah says that this Qur'an is going to guide you to that which is most upright. And then he goes on to say that it gives the believers good tidings, that if they do good deeds, that they have a great reward waiting for them. And for those who don't believe in the hereafter, we have prepared for them a painful punishment. Now, the question that is in our minds is what? That the Quran says that it is a book that leads to that which is most upright. Now we want some guidance. It says it guides to that which is upright. What is that guidance? What message does it have for us? What particular guidance does it have for us to lead our lives in the most upright way possible? So this is very important in the context that we see. What is the first piece of advice that God is going to give us in this respect? He says, وَيَدْعُ الْإِنسَانُ بِالشَّرِّ دُعَاءَهُ بِالْخَيْرِ وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ عَجُولًا. Literally, this means that a human being calls for evil the same way that he calls for good. And the human being is hasty. Now we need to step back and try to understand, first of all, what these words mean, and then try to piece it together, and then see how this is related to the previous point, which is that the Quran is guiding us to that way of life which is the most upright. First of all, usually when somebody's reading this, maybe you read this before in the past, you're reading this, you're like, okay, well, يَدْعُ الْإِنسَانُ بِالشَّرِّ دُعَاءَهُ بِالْخَيْرِ. So this is talking about making dua. And it's saying that the human being makes dua for evil. Now, which one of us makes dua for evil? Right? Who goes on their prayer mat and after they say their prayers, they say, "Oh, Rabbana atina evil." Right? Nobody says that, right? We're always praying for goodness, right? Hasana and good things to come to us. We're praying for like long life and good health and happiness and fortune and health for our families and safety from the oppressors and closeness to God, these type of things. So who is it that prays for evil? What is God talking about here? Allama Tabatabai rahmatullahi alayhi gives a very beautiful explanation of this verse. What he says is that there's two types of dua that we make. There's one that we make with our tongue, that when we actually call upon God and we say, "Oh God, give me this thing right here." But there's another type of dua that we make that we don't say with our tongue, but we actually demonstrate in our actions. And that dua is whenever we do anything where we seek something from outside of us. Okay, let me give you an example. I wake up in the morning, all right? The first thing I want to do is what? I want to go, say, wash up, right? I can't just wash up by myself. I need some water to wash up. So I go into the restroom, right? I turn on the light. I can't do it in the dark. I turn on the light. I take some water. I grab some toothpaste, put on my toothbrush, right? I'm needing all these things just in the span of, say half a minute. And as I go on in the course of my day, I need clothes to wear. I need a space to operate in. I need air to breathe. I need people around me to say salam alaikum to and ask for them to ask me how I'm doing, and we need to talk, right? Because I'm a social being, right? I need an automobile to transport myself. I need etc., etc., right? If you start listing how many things you need in a day outside of you, the list will keep on growing and growing and growing. So you're with me so far, right? Okay. Now, for each one of those things, we don't necessarily make a dua where we say, "Oh Allah, give me some water that I can use to wash my face. Oh Allah, give me some toothpaste I can use to brush my teeth." We don't actually necessarily say it. But in action, from the perspective of Allah, when He's looking at us, and He's always looking at us, we're making a dua. Why? Because we're practically asking for something. We're practically demonstrating a need for something, and whenever you demonstrate a need for something, from the perspective of Allah, you're asking from Him. You see, from our perspective, we're looking at the toothpaste, we're looking at the faucet, for the sink, which is giving us water, we're looking at the people around us, we're looking at our car keys, we're looking at our textbooks, and we're thinking that we're getting stuff from all these. But in the eyes of Allah and one who sees things through the Tawheedi perspective, all of this is emanating from where? It's emanating from Allah. So every one of these requests that we're making of the world around us, they ultimately are requests from Allah. So how many du'as do we practically make in a day? From the time we wake up, just start adding, counting, right? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? It's innumerable. And as a side point, if we ever wonder, oh Allah, why is it that you're not answering our dua? Maybe we should rethink and sort of reanalyze the situation. Because if we think about dua in this wider terminology, then from the time I woke, just today, from the time I woke up in this morning until now, how many du'as have been answered? Right? Every single action that I've done, every single thought I've had, every single movement I've made, I've been in need of something other than myself. And so in essence, Allah's been answering my du'as from the time I woke up until now, innumerably. Allah's always answering my du'as. Okay, so this is a side point in case people are wondering sometimes, why is it that Allah's not answering my dua? Actually, He is answering tons of our du'as all the time. Because He's giving us those things that we need. Even though we don't necessarily ask for them or even thank Him for them or even acknowledge that they are coming from Allah. Now, let's go on. So, the verse says that the human being calls for evil. Not necessarily that we make dua for evil, but we're calling for it in our actions. We do things that bring about evil consequences for us. And we do so to such an extent that Allah says that, look, you're doing it, وَيَدُعُ الْإِنسَانَ بِالشَّرِّ دُعَاءَهُ بِالْخَيْرِ, meaning that the same way that, the same amount that you actually are doing things seeking good in your life, you're actually the same amount, to the same extent, you're doing things which you're calling evil upon yourself. Meaning that your actions, Allah's taking it from His perspective. He's sharing with us His viewpoint. He's saying that from my perspective, the way that you're operating in this world, you're doing things that you think are for your own good, but in reality, a lot of what you do is just bringing about evil for yourself. And the same way that you think you're looking for good things for yourself, you're actually bringing about evil for yourself. Right? Now this is a reality. It's a very important reality. And we need to come back to this and analyze it in a little bit more detail. But I want to go on with the verse right now. Because Allah is giving us a clue now as to why we're doing this. He says, وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ عَجُولًا. The human being is ajul. Human beings in general, not every single human being, but the characteristic of a human being who hasn't worked on himself or herself, hasn't trained him or herself, hasn't gotten close to God, hasn't been able to tame those material tendencies within them, they are going to be ajul. Ajul means what? Ajul comes from the word ajal or ajala. They mean the same thing. Now what does ajal or ajala mean? I'm sure you all know kind of, but let's just define it very clearly. Ajal and ajala is where literally in English, maybe you could translate it as being hastiness. All right? Not hasty as in somebody is like walking fast or they're running fast. No, not that in that sense, right? Hastiness meaning what? That when there's something that we want and the time has not arrived for that thing, then, and we still want it, then we are being hasty. Meaning that we want something not at the right time. So let me just give you an example. Imagine that a lot of you, I understand, have gardens here because it's Southern California, right? It's, like this is a place where good stuff grows, right? So you have gardens, right? Now imagine that you plant your sapling when, in the fall or in the early spring, whenever. Okay, it starts growing, okay, and now your tree, suddenly you see that the flowers start to bud and this small little fruit starts to grow. Okay, let's say it's an orange. Okay, oranges grow on trees, right? Okay, just want to all right. So this orange starts to grow. Now you're really excited, right? You first time you see this thing growing, you're like, oh, let me go and take it off the branch, right? Well, you're being hasty because it's not the time. If you try to open and eat it, it's probably going to be bitter. You have to wait until exactly the right time that orange is developed, right? Right then, that's when you got to pluck it, and that's when you can enjoy it the way it's meant to be. Being hasty is when you seek something before its time. That's the literal meaning of it. Now, we need to understand what Allah is telling us though, because we're going to apply this to this notion of how we make decisions and what we are looking for in our lives. There's a very powerful message here. Again, Allah brings this verse in the context of talking about how the Quran guides us to the best way of life. Now, he goes on, he says, he wants to give us an analogy here to help us understand this. What does he say? He says, وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ آيَتَيْنِ. We have rendered the night and day as signs. Everything in this world is a sign of Allah. Everything. Every single thing is a sign of Allah because it indicates its creator and its Lord and its nourisher and its sustainer. If we look at it the right way, we can see Allah in everything in this universe. But there's two of His signs that Allah wants to highlight in this verse in the context of a human being having the tendency to be ajul, to be hasty, which is the night and the day. He goes on to say, he says that فَمَحَوْنَا آيَةَ اللَّيْلِ, we cause the sign of the night, that night which is a sign, we erase that night. وَجَعَلْنَا آيَةَ النَّهَارِ مُبْصِرَةً, and then we make the day, that sign which is the daytime, bright and filled with light. لِتَبْتَغُوا فَضْلًا مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ, so that you may seek bounty from your Lord. Now, what is the connection between these natural signs in this universe and the human being having the tendency to be hasty? This is very, very beautiful. This is on the basis of what the commentators have said, the respective, the great commentators. They say 2 points. First of all, look at the way that Allah brings about the night how He brings about the daytime when it's night. Like it's dark outside, all right, and you look outside, everything is dark. Now, suddenly, the dawn, the Fajr comes, right, and it starts to get bright. Now, question: does it get bright right away? It doesn't get bright right away. Gradually, slowly, sky, and it becomes pale, and then it gets a little bit brighter, and then suddenly, after a period of time, then voila, right? The sun peaks up over the horizon, and it's bright, and it gets brighter and brighter. It's a gradual process. It's not something that just happens just like this. The same way, when the sun starts to dip in the sky, it gradually starts to get darker outside, darker and darker, and then you see that the sky begins to become pale and then slowly fades into darkness. It's not something which happens just right away. So this is something that we see all the time, but do we take lessons from it? Do we try to learn something about the way Allah operates in the universe? One of the lessons we can take from this is that Allah is encouraging us to look at this and say, wait a minute. If this is the way that I operate in the physical world, where everything is done on a gradual basis, everything is done according to a certain set of rules, a very precise system, then why is it that in your own personal lives you don't operate on the same basis? Why don't you also operate according to a certain set of rules and a certain set of standards, and understand that the same way I have rules that work in the physical universe, I have rules that work in terms of your lives as well too. Meaning that if you want to seek goodness in your lives, then you have to understand the way that I have placed and made goodness available to you. Don't be hasty and just make decisions rashly and look at things at the surface level. No, understand what the system is and don't try to cheat the system either. So this is one lesson that we learn. Another lesson that we learn is when we look at the day and the night, we see that the day and the night, they have their own characteristics, right? Like in the daytime is when we can go out, we can seek a livelihood, we go out. I mean, in general, things happen in the daytime, right? Like that's when you go and study, that's when you go and learn, that's when you go and socialize, that's when you go and go to work, right? At nighttime, it's typically when people are going to rest. Things kind of recede at the nighttime. Even, you might say that, okay, in today's world, you can have things which are 24-hour, people can be working around the clock, but the reality is that what? No, it's not healthy for the body, right? Like, we need to get our sleep, and even if you go out at past midnight, most stuff is closed. People understand that the nighttime is for resting, the daytime is for being out. This is the way that the universe works, and there's so many things we could say about this, about the beauty of this sign of Allah, and how amazing it is that He can bring the daytime into existence. Just imagine, just as a side point here, imagine how much electricity does it take to light up a football field. You've seen that, right? At nighttime, sometimes they light up a whole football field. They have those big, huge floodlights. But imagine how many kilo or megawatts of amperage and electricity is being used at that time. It's a lot, right? A lot of watts are being used to generate the electricity. But here you see the entire earth, like being illuminated for the most part at different times of a 24-hour period. And it's just happening, right? There's a lot of signs there for us to see. Now, that was a tangent. Let me just go back to the essence, what I wanted to convey. That the second point that the Mufassirin, the commentators, say is that, look at the daytime here and the nighttime are symbols for that same goodness and evil that we mentioned, that Allah mentioned previously, where the daytime is a sign that there is a daytime and there is nighttime as well too. The daytime can come and erase all traces of the nighttime. So the same way when it comes to goodness as well too, you should be looking for good. Allah wants us, He created us so that we find good things in our lives. But you should understand that there is evil as well too. And this is part of the system that Allah has created. The same way there is a day, there is a night. The same way there is good and there is evil. Learn the rules, learn the system, and don't try to cheat the system. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So now, inshallah, we've understood the basic message of this verse here, which is that we are supposed to understand that there is a system that God has created. Right? We need to make decisions in the right way and not be hasty in making our decisions and not look at the whole picture. Now, I want to give, for the remainder of the speech tonight, I want to give 2 examples of how we can apply this practically. And as I do so, I think you'll see how this is a very important teaching that we have from the Quran that applies particularly to our lives. And let me just tell you something, that we are living in an age right now which is the age of hastiness. It's the age of instant gratification. Right? This is something that, I don't know if you've thought about this. Like, I want to encourage you to think about this. Let me give you a couple of examples. Take fast food. Okay, fast food is something that is relatively new. It's something which is part of our era. And a lot of us grew up in that era of fast food. Now, there's certain ways, natural ways that God created for us to be able to eat food in a way that's wholesome and healthy for our bodies. But the idea with fast food was that, we want to give people a way to get whatever they want right away. The instant gratification. And, you can grab a working lunch, just go in and pull in through the drive-thru and grab a cheeseburger or something, and then you're on your way. Now, it's interesting, like you go and look, what are the effects that this type of food preparation has had on people's health? They say that there's a strong correlation between that and obesity. Right? And we don't even understand what sort of food they're putting together. Is it even really food? Let me just give you an example. Like, they say that in 1999, now 1999 was a long time ago. Some of you weren't even born at that time, or you're just like kids. 1999, this guy bought a cheeseburger from McDonald's. All right, and he happened to forget about it. I don't know how he forgot about it. He forgot about it. He stuck it in his pocket. And 2 years later, in 2001, all right, he brought it out of his pocket and he looked at it and he said, hey, this is a cheeseburger. And it's still intact. So he took a picture of it at that time because he was amazed that this cheeseburger hadn't decomposed. There was no, insects on it. It was still a cheeseburger. That was back in when, 2001, he took that picture. Now, it's 2013. A couple of months ago, he took another picture. And guess what? It's the same cheeseburger. It hasn't changed in any way whatsoever. The only thing that's changed is that the pickle disappeared from it. Now, you would think that the rest of it would disappear as well too, but no. The bread is still there. The thing that they call bread is still there. The thing that they call a burger is still there. And the thing that they call ketchup and the thing they call mustard is still there as well too. So when you look at this, you got to wonder, look, this age of instant gratification, of fast, of doing things on the basis of our own whims, right? Without any sort of patience, without looking and seeing what is the system that God created for naturally producing and cooking food which is wholesome and healthy, that for centuries, cultures had developed and perfected. When you're going to throw out all that out the window, what's going to happen to people's health, and what is the result anyways? We don't even understand some of the effects that it has had on our health. You can take that same concept, apply it to other areas too. Like, take public transportation versus giving everyone a car. Right? Part of giving everyone a car is that you give the person, the individual, to immediately go to wherever they want to go, right, without any sort of, supposedly without any type of restrictions. Right? Now you're giving them without, there's no type of sort of concern for anything else. Just let them go whatever you want, whenever you want. But the reality is what? The reality is Highway 5, right? Or other sort of traffic situations. So this is something that is very much relevant to our lives. Now I want to take it into the area of Iman and some of our practices. Let me give you 2 examples. One of them is the issue of pornography. Okay, this is a serious issue. It's an issue that we are facing as a Muslim community as well, too, as a community of mu'mineen as well. And being in the position that I'm in, sometimes you hear things that you don't necessarily want to hear, and they make you sad and make you disappointed, but they're the reality. And the reality is that this is an issue. And if you go back and look at what is the essence of it, the essence of it is the same thing, that whatever it is that somebody's base desires want, give it to them right now. Right? There's no notion of trying to understand what is the perspective of this in God's system, and the idea of waiting and abstinence or anything like that. No, it's that whatever they want and they need at that moment, whatever animalistic instinct, even if it's the most base instinct possible, let it be fulfilled right here and right now. Now, this concept of pornography, right? If you go and analyze it, it's not the time for us to go into in detail. I don't want to focus the speech on this either. I just want to mention a couple of points. That first of all, the notion behind it is what? That somebody feels shahwa, somebody feels that lust, therefore let them fulfill that right away. From an Islamic perspective, we see that shahwa as being a blessing. We see it as an indication. It's something that's supposed to help us when it comes time for us to find a spouse. But before that time, we've been given a way to suppress that and combat that and put it aside. We've been created strong enough to be able to withstand the pressure of the shahwa. And we've been told and given techniques to be able to control it as well too. For example, casting the eyes down. That's something which is very important, a very important habit that we need to develop. Those who are not married, those who are married as well too. It's something which is an Islamic teaching. Now, we've been given that power to be able to overcome this. We've also been given the means to observe it in a halal way as well too, which is marriage. And that's something that we need to encourage, and I've talked about that before as well too. But here, this industry or this entity comes along and says that, forget about all of that. Right? Whatever you feel like, right here and now, we're going to give you instant gratification. The result is horrendous. Right? Why? Because they say that the effect that pornography has on a human being is the same that hard drugs has. What does it do? Hard drugs affects your brain, and it creates a false feeling of need towards that drug. So you have like maybe a sniff on one day, right? Then you get, it kind of feels pretty good, right? You go back the next day and now you need 2 sniffs, right? And then it becomes something where you get addicted and you need more and more and more of it just to be fulfilled and satisfied. They've shown that pornography has the same effect on a human being, right? It becomes like a drug for the human being. And guess what? They're not even really wanting that. That's not something that we even really desire. It's something that they presented as a fake substitute for what we really need. What do we really need? Number 1, we need spouses, right, when it comes time for that. But number 2 is we need God in our lives. And this is something that we can't be fooled about. We can't assume that through these temporary fixes like drugs, like alcohol, like pornography, that we can replace the need for God that's within us. Let me take you to Surah Al-Qiyamah, which is Surah number 75. And this is verse number, just recite a salawat, please. Verses number 20 and 21. Here Allah is expanding for us on this concept of what it means to make decisions hastily. Now this is key, brothers and sisters. This is very important. He says what? He says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم كلا بل تحبون العاجلة وَتَذَرُونَ الْآخِرَةِ. He's saying, he's bemoaning the fact that human beings operate like this. What do? They love the ajila. What is the ajila? Ajila comes from the same word, ajal. Ajala, right? That which is hasty. But what it means here, it's an adjective. What is an adjective for? It's an adjective for that lifestyle which is quick and easy. Right? That lifestyle which is the fast and whatever I want at the fingertips, instant gratification lifestyle. Allah is just, he's bemoaning the fact that human beings are like this, saying that why are you like this? Why do you love that which seems to be good and appealing for you right here and now? بَلْ تُحِبُّونَ الْعَجْلَ وَتَذَرُونَ الْآخِرَةِ. You're leaving aside the akhirah. What is the akhirah? Usually we think about the akhirah as being something that comes about after we die and then after the barzakh and that type of thing. But in the Quranic language, the akhirah refers to al-hayatul akhirah. It refers to the other part of our existence beyond the glitz and the glamour and the appeal of instant gratification. There's something beyond that. If somebody is able to resist that temptation of lust and haram sort of activities associated with that, what lies for them here and now in this world is something which is known as the akhirah. And that's something which is very beautiful as well too. With it comes happiness, with it comes attachment to God, with it comes knowledge of God, feeling that God is with us, and there's nothing that can replace that. We're told in hadith that, in a number of hadith, that كَم مِّن شَهْوَةِ سَاعَةٍ كَم مِّن شَهْوَةِ سَاعَةٍ تُورِثُ حَزْنًا طَوِيلًا. Right? It's one of those hadiths that write down up and put it up on your wall. Right? What does it say? It says that how often it is the case that a moment of shahwa, a moment of acting upon lust in a haram way, causes and produces a great long amount of grief. It brings about depression. It brings about a depressed lifestyle. So, if it is the case that somebody has a habit, is addicted to this thing, is falling for this, they have to understand that the solution cannot be found here, right? As a believer, I need to step back and see, wait a minute, I need to use my aql and say that Allah is guiding me to making decisions not on just a surface level. I need to step back and look and understand that everything isn't just what it seems. There's the akhirah as well too. I need to consider the consequences of my action. This is not the time for me to be acting upon my lust, which is haram, so I need to observe the act of casting my eyes down. I need to look at what other teachings we have within Islam to be able to curb the shahwa. I need to control who am I hanging out with, what I see, what sort of TV stations I see, what sort of things I look at on the internet. All these things will affect what it is that I do and what happens to the sense of shahwa as well too. Please recite salawat ala Muhammad. The second and last example I want to give for tonight, inshallah we'll continue this discussion tomorrow night, about how this concept applies is when it comes to family matters and raising others, in particular children. Before I mention this, I just want to make a point that in the Islamic perspective, the idea of raising isn't just something that is done between parents and children. In the Islamic perspective, I, as an individual, am supposed to be able to try and raise, meaning bring people to God, everyone around me who is capable of being raised and lifted and elevated, including myself. In fact, first and foremost, I have to be working on myself, trying to raise and nurture my own self, and then I need to be trying to influence everyone around me. So, in the way which is proper, right? So, for example, if I'm a husband, part of my responsibility in my relationship with my spouse is that I'm trying to raise my spouse, not that I'm trying to like parent her, no, but I'm trying to help her become a believer and get to Allah as well too. I'm trying to take her hand and together walk down that path to Allah. And we need to see our responsibility in lives as being not just limited to, let's say, one or two individuals, but everyone around us that we can affect. But this comes up in particular when it comes to parents raising their children, because the responsibility is more eminent, right? We need to be looking to understand what sort of teachings we have within Islam to be able to raise our children in a way that they will be believers in God. Now, one of the teachings we have in Islam is related to this idea. This teaching that we have a number of teachings in Islam. One of them has to do with this concept of not being hasty. And I want to illustrate this by looking at the story of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam in the Quran. This is from chapter 12 in the Quran, around verse 90. Here we see, you all know the story, where the brothers of Nabi Yusuf committed a terrible act. Right? What they did is they wanted to kill him, and they said that we're not going to kill him. Instead, we'll lie to our father, we'll pretend to take him out, and we'll be alone with him, and then we'll put him in the bottom of a well. So the Quran tells us that they got permission from the father, Nabi Yaqub. They take Nabi Yusuf, who's just a small child, and they take him out into the pastures. And finally, when they've gotten him alone, away from his father, before they put him down in the well, they start to abuse him. And this is from Hadith. What happens is, like, one of them hits him, and these are his brothers, right? He had looked up to his brothers his whole life, right? These were his role models, these were his supporters. But one of them hits him, and then according to Hadith, he runs to another brother, and that brother hits him, and he goes to another brother, and so on and so forth. And then after all of that, they put him down in the well alone without any food or water, and they go back to their father and they lie and they say that a wolf has eaten your son. And all of this was out of jealousy as well too. Now, if you want to list the type of crimes that somebody could commit against somebody, these are some of the most heinous crimes, right? Like, it's terrible. Now, after all this, many years pass, and the brothers insult him again. If you follow the story, you'll know that even along the way, they insult him once again in a very terrible sort of way. Anyhow, at the end of the story, what happens is that the brothers come to know that this king and this minister of Egypt, who has been so kind to them and been so generous to them and is so powerful and so noble, is their own brother. So what do they say? They say that, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, this is verse 90, قَالُوا أَإِنَّكَ لَأَنْتَ Yusuf? Are you Yusuf? He says, قَالَ أَنَا Yusuf وَهَذَا أَخِي. I am Yusuf and this is my brother. قَدْ مَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا. Allah has indeed been very kind to us and done us a great favor. إِنَّهُ مَنْ يَتَّقِي وَيَصْبِرْ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. And then Nabi Yusuf slips in a piece of guidance for them. All this is important. It's leading up to what I want to say. He says that, a general rule, he says that whoever has taqwa and whoever is patient, then Allah does not waste the reward of the good doers. He's answering a question that they have in their mind. What is that question? The question is that how could you go from being at the bottom of a well, beaten up, without any support or without any food or water, left to die, how could you go from that to being the king of Egypt? And being in such a position and had done so many acts of generosity and kindness to us. How is that even possible? For them, it's just unbelievable. And he gives them the secret. The formula is very simple. If you have taqwa in your life and you're patient, then Allah won't leave you hanging. Now, they go on to say, what do they say? They say, قَالُوا تَاللَّهِ لَقَدْ آثَرَكَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا. By Allah, Allah has preferred you over us. وَإِن كُنَّا لَخَاطِئِينَ. And we indeed are the ones who have made a mistake. We have been in error. Now at this point, put yourself in Nabi Yusuf's shoes. What if you were there and you are in the position of power and they have done all these terrible things to you, and now they come to you and they are in the position where they're totally like at your mercy. Okay, like seriously, what would we do? And most of us would use that opportunity to make a point that we were upset when you put us in the bottom of the well and when you did this and that to us, right? We would make it a point. In fact, we wouldn't just stop there, right? We would punish them, we would hit them, we would cause them to be arrested, etc. But look at how Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam responds. He says, قَالَ لَا تَثْرِيبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْيَوْمِ. He says, there is no blame on you at all, no blame at all on you. Today, يَغْفِرُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. Allah will forgive you. وَهُوَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. He is the most merciful of the mercifuls, of those who are merciful. Brothers and sisters, we can derive a very important lesson from this. And this is one of the principles that we have when raising children and when dealing with other people in general. It's a principle of taghaful. What is that? That at times, our hasty impulses may call us to react swiftly to any mistake that our child or even our spouse or anybody else does. We want to, if you see something, they're doing something wrong, we want to tell them off right away. We want to call them out for that. Or we want them to be a certain way. And so we want them to be that way right here and now, so we tell them that. And we tell them once and we tell them twice, we force it on them, we compel them every way we can. But if we just step back and look at things, remember how the sun rises gradually, how the night comes in gradually, right? There's a system by which Allah operates in this universe. We have to understand that there's a system by which people operate as well too. The way to deal with people, the way to correct them, and the way to encourage them towards good things is not to tell them off right away. In fact, many times, or most times, that's going to backfire. But rather, when we realize that they themselves have figured it out, right, then there's no need to rebuke them for that or to tell them for that. Look at these brothers. They realized, first of all, Nabi Yusuf used that opportunity to give them that piece of guidance. He used their mistake as a learning opportunity for them. And then they realized their mistake. They admit that we're the ones who were in error. They realize also that they owe something to Nabi Yusuf. They realize that they have to do tawbah to Allah as well too. They have to repent for their bad deeds. At this point, what's the point of Nabi Yusuf mentioning this? They figured it out. So he completely turns his head, completely ignores what it is that they did. He doesn't even mention the specific of it. This is nothing at all on you today. If our children, or let's say our spouse, if it's something which is a minor issue, most times it's better for us not to even mention it. Right? Focus on the big picture. Focus on the haram and the halal. That's very important. Those are the big picture. Focus on those really important moral teachings that we have, and those things you drive home. You give encouragement, you give maw'idha, you talk about principles. But when it comes to those small little things, most often people will realize them themselves. To react swiftly and based on compulsion, ajul, to be hasty about it, often will backfire and won't result in the desired consequences that we want, which is to raise them and bring them closer to Allah. We ask Allah to help us understand the message of the Quran, to act upon it and spread it to others. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi.